It's Friday, February 22nd. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright, two things real quick. Number one, I do have a slight cold and a stuffy nose, so if I sound a little bit weird, that's why. Number two, we have to start off with a non-PlayStation news story because how can we not talk about this, but Reggie Fils-Aimé, the president of Nintendo America, is retiring after 15 years with the company, and Reggie's just one of those dudes where he always came off as very genuine, very passionate about the fans, and he was just an overall very charismatic guy. It was always fun to watch him on Nintendo stage, or delivering directs. He always had that sort of slow but a very enunciating way of talking. He was a very cool dude. It's disappointing to see him go. We've had a lot of sort of turnover lately with these high corporate level dudes. Like for example with Sony, we had Andrew House leave, Jack Tretton, Kaz Hirai. So a lot of big names have been leaving in recent years, but taking his place will be Doug Bowser, who was previously head of marketing and sales at Nintendo, and of course a lot of websites and videos are having a field day with his name because his last name is Bowser, so don't need to tell you why that's pretty funny. But there you go, Reggie. Enjoy your retirement. He totally earned it. Very, very awesome dude. I love Reggie. Everybody loves Reggie. Our actual PlayStation news stories, PS3 firmware 4.84. This is available right now. Nothing crazy. System performance, software stability, pretty much what you'd typically expect whenever Sony does this with a very old platform. It's usually covering up some sort of a loophole or whatever for a jailbreak, maybe some sort of recent jailbreak surface for the platform, maybe. Who knows? Could be something very minor, but if you have to log into your PS3 and have to use PSN, now you have to sort of download this little patch, which is kind of annoying. Not really a big deal, but just throwing that out there. Now for our next news story, Atlus has a survey on their website, and I believe they're also emailing it to a few people as well. But it's one of those surveys where they're kind of asking about the future of their franchises. And I'm only mentioning this because despite the fact that Atlus is a third-party developer and publisher, they do make a lot of PlayStation exclusives, and they're one of those third parties that willingly makes a lot of PlayStation exclusives, kind of like NIS, where they're maybe more niche titles or more obscure games, or they don't necessarily sell in the 5+ million range, but they might have a 1 or 2 million seller, maybe a game that doesn't cost that much and sells between 200,000 to 300,000 copies, and they just typically always release exclusively on PlayStation or PlayStation Vita. Anyway, their survey makes a couple of interesting notes. I mean, there's the typical questions there of like, what platforms do you own? Are you going to buy more platforms in the future? This, that, and the other. But they ask about, the Persona franchise, if you'd like to see just another sequel, or if you'd like to see remakes or remasters. And they specifically mention previous Persona games like Persona 3 and Persona 4, which are very big games. A lot of people actually really enjoy those games a lot. Persona 4 still regarded as one of the best PlayStation Vita games ever. And now a lot of people want to be exposed to these games on PlayStation 4. So, I really hope this is a situation where they're definitely considering this and maybe porting over some of these big games over. And by the way, the survey also mentions that they might consider porting them to Nintendo Switch or Xbox One or PC, which is fine. They are allowed to do that. These games should be exposed to more people because they're great games. But man, I really want to see Persona 3 and 4 put on PlayStation 4 and other platforms as well. Now for our next news story, Dreamz has a release window and a release scenario, which sounds a little bit odd, but hear me out. So Sony recently announced on the PlayStation blog that Dreamz will be coming this spring in early access. So actually it will be launching as a paid title for $29.99, or I believe $40 in Canada, and it just has the creation tool. So it would also have the creator, I don't want to say storefront, but sort of that marketplace of user-generated levels where you can go play other people's levels and creations and things like that. But you're basically buying into just the creation tool set to sort of make what you want to, do what you want to do, toy around or whatever. Basically all that sort of stuff. Because we know that Dreamz actually will have a campaign and single player of some kind. Media Molecule hasn't told us a whole lot about that, but they've always been pretty forward that it's going to be a basic game that releases, and it's going to be for everybody, not just creators, but people that want to play some sort of content that's already there and created and go from point A to point B. This I find pretty fascinating because a few years back, Sony actually was pretty vocal about not being into the early access thing. And FYI, early access meaning, you pay for a game, but it's very much so in the early stages. It's still in development. It's still an ongoing process, and buying it at that price typically allows you to have the future content that is planned for the game. So I don't know how Media Molecule is going to plan that. I would hope that buying it for $30 in spring would give you access to the full feature set of the game whenever it decides to make an actual launch. But Sony has been kind of against that. They've been kind of against the whole early access thing. I believe it was Adam Boyes when he was the vice president of third-party relations at Sony, or maybe it was somebody else in an interview, but they weren't really too hot on that idea. So this actually, I think, works out a lot better, because not only do you have this sort of PR buzz of the game coming out at $30, you know, it comes out, we get to see all this content that gets made and publicized, people get really into it. They might not want to buy into it right away because there's, you know, they might not be creators themselves, they might not want to, you know, maybe they just wouldn't be into it right away. But then you'd have this buzz later on where the game launches at a full $60 retail or $40, $50, however they want to do it. But once again, you've got more PR and buzz generating once you get final, you know, review copies out to, you know, publications and YouTubers and things like that and streamers. So I think this is maybe the best way, because this is the kind of game that doesn't come out, sell a bunch, and then kind of dips down and dies off. This is a game that is going to be ever-changing and evolving, and it needs a steady stream of revenue and people playing and buying into it. So I think this is kind of the best way to do it. Now, I didn't really expect this to happen this past week, but Sony Santa Monica sent over a replica Tesla rifle gun to the Ready at Dawn developers who made the Order 1886. The Tesla rifle was from the Order 1886, and so it's a very cool commissioned little rifle. Looks just like how it did in the game. And it's celebrating the 4th anniversary of the game. The Order 1886 came out February 20th, 2015, so that's kind of the special occasion there, but that's cool. I think it looks pretty dope. It's just sort of like a random thing. I mean, this in no way means a sequel's coming or anything like that, but I just think it's cool. Generates that camaraderie in the games industry, and also Sony's still acknowledging their old IP, even though it didn't do all that well. Now, for our next news story, I just want the record to show, for as long as I've been doing this YouTube channel, I have always said the Vita is still alive. It still gets games made for it. It still gets manufactured. Sony still supports it. The PlayStation Store is still up. Everything's still going good for the PlayStation Vita, despite the fact that it's obviously not selling all that well. And I've said that for years. However, this is the actual news story where you will personally hear me say this platform is finally coming to an official end, because not only have shipments ceased to North America and Europe, but now they're finally ceasing in Japan, which was the only territory the platform had any little bit of meaningful life left in it. So the product pages for PlayStation Vita in Japan say that shipments are going to be ending soon. So basically that's it. Totally done. And we'd already known for a few months now that PlayStation Vita cartridges weren't going to be manufactured anymore. Sony kind of wanted the last orders to come in from publishers and developers that were going to be releasing games on the platform. So this is it. The platform is finally coming to an official close. So there you go. PlayStation Vita, you are finally going off into the sunset. And it's like, technically, not entirely just yet, only because PlayStation Network on the system is still going to be supported for quite a while, I would assume. Probably 3-4 years minimum, I would hope. It would be actually rather unfortunate if Sony ceased PlayStation Network support and the PlayStation Store support on the platform that soon, because you'd still want the storefront to be available to download and purchase content and things like that. But it really is a shame, dude, that it didn't do that well, because PlayStation Vita was so awesome, and it's what started my channel. I started making PlayStation Vita videos in 2012. I loved the platform. It was awesome. And there's still so many other dedicated YouTubers to making PlayStation Vita content. Hashtag Vita Island. People love Vita so much. They buy all the physical games that they can. They got a big Vita shelf. It's so cool to see all that. It's like, it's one of those platforms, like this platform did so well from that dedicated fan base. Like, it was not a commercial success by any means, but it had such a dedicated following. I think that's what's so special about that platform. Moving on, Amy Hennig, previously of Naughty Dog, recently did an interview with US Gamer, divulging a little bit of details about the Uncharted 4 that she was kind of working on versus the Uncharted 4 that actually ended up coming out. Now, if you don't know this scenario, by the way, Amy Hennig was the writer for the Uncharted franchise, and she was working on Uncharted 4 and actually left the company. It was kind of a big deal at the time because we weren't really sure where Uncharted 4 was going to go. Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley took over. And then, you know, we also had a teaser trailer early on that kind of revealed some sort of voice saying he was a prisoner, blah, blah, this and that. He wanted to get revenge on Drake. We found out that that was supposed to be the brother. So people kind of fit together already that the sort of original idea for Uncharted 4 for Amy's version was that Sam, Nate's brother, was supposed to be an antagonist. Well, Amy kind of just talked a little bit further about that and told us some of the key differences of what she was trying to do and what ended up coming out. And it wasn't actually that different, but she was actually quoted as saying, "All the beats, if you look at the chapter beats, with the exception of we didn't have the flashbacks to his childhood, and then we didn't have the Nadine character. But just looking at that, the break by break that sorted the chapters, like where they go, what was happening, that was all while I was there." The DNA and the core story were all there. The major differences had to do with, like, I was introducing the idea of Sam as the brother, but my take on it was sort of different. That it was a little bit more, I mean, I wouldn't call him the antagonist in the classic sense, but it was an antagonistic force in Drake's life that he then had to reconcile. So it was, you know, complicated by stuff coming up from the past. So it's a little bit different than him showing up and, you know, hey bro, I got a problem. Then, of course, there was an antagonistic element in Sam in the final version of Uncharted 4, but it wasn't right there from the onset. So we kind of, in my story, it was a little bit more of a journey from his ghost from Drake's past, being an antagonist, to a sort of reconciliation and reunification. Now, from the way I'm taking this, it really does sound like we kind of got the same game. I mean, yeah, like, there is some differences, like there wasn't Nadine or the childhood flashbacks, but it seems like her version was more animosity between the two, whereas the final game, and no spoilers mind you, but Sam and Drake didn't really have any animosity. They sort of clicked right away and, you know, got along and had those sort of quips back and forth, and they kind of were very brotherly throughout most of the game. And it sounds like for Amy's version of the game, without Nadine or the childhood flashbacks, it seems like it was more just a situation of maybe, you know, throughout gameplay there wouldn't be, you know, there'd be more, again, animosity, I guess would be the best word for it, right? Where they aren't super close. You know, Sam might have some ill feelings towards Drake, but slowly that relationship sort of heals a little bit as the game progresses. It seems like that's really where Amy was sort of going with that game. So it's cool to get those extra details, but it's funny because I remember covering this story, you know, years ago on Let's Talk PlayStation, between her and Naughty Dog, and I remember saying at that time, you know, we don't know what happened between her and Naughty Dog. We're just going to have to wait years until somebody spills the beans during an interview or something like that. And that's where we are. So it's cool that we finally got that. Now, for our next news story, you know how we do here on Let's Talk PlayStation. If it's a big, major, groundbreaking news story, even if it's not related to PlayStation, if it's for the greater scope of the games industry, we definitely talk about it here and it deserves our attention. This story is no different. This is a rumor from Direct Feed Games. Keep in mind, it's a rumor, but it's a somewhat reliable source. They've been right before. Apparently, Xbox is going to be providing Xbox Game Pass on Nintendo Switch. This might be announced as early as, you know, at some point this year, more or less. And the sort of details of the rumor is that Xbox Game Pass would be available on Nintendo Switch, and it would be in a situation where the games could sometimes be natively ported, like a smaller scale title like Ori and the Blind Forest, and if it's a more heavily demanding title like, say, you know, Halo, Gears of War, Crackdown, any sort of, I mean, third-party game, EA games, whatever. If it's a big, you know, big budget console game that's clearly not going to be powerful to run natively on the Switch, it would be streamed via Project xCloud. And so this is kind of a really, really big deal because not only is Nintendo allowing this, but Microsoft is doing this. And this really goes into, I mean, if this isn't more telling about the strategy between both of these companies, I don't know what is. And this says a lot about what Microsoft's been doing recently, which we kind of already know. Xbox Play Anywhere. You buy an Xbox game, you can play it on all these different platforms. We know they're doing Project xCloud to stream Xbox games anywhere. We know they're doing Xbox Live on Nintendo Switch. We didn't know what that really entailed. We assumed it was just, you know, smaller scale apps, access to your friends list, achievements, things like that. We know Microsoft has game developers that release games on multiple platforms. There are some games they do, you know, release that are platform agnostic. They let Rare develop on other platforms sometimes. They have Minecraft everywhere. It makes more sense for Microsoft to make more money on those games being available everywhere, you know what I mean? But this is really telling because this means Microsoft really wants to shy away from hardware and just focus on generating Xbox revenue from services and subscriptions and things like that. And, you know, that's not really surprising given that every sort of major tech company or business is moving more towards subscription-based services, so not surprising whatsoever. But, you know, you would think that they'd still want to sell Xbox hardware, but man, they're really sort of going to a place now where they just do not care. If they can get you into that ecosystem of the Xbox Live storefront, having an Xbox Live account, having money and currency in an Xbox Live account that is paying for services and games and content, I mean, they're going all out. And this also says a lot about Nintendo because what we said about that Xbox Live news story was that Nintendo is openly acknowledging that they are a secondary platform to many people in millions of households across the world, which is that they know that they're a platform that doesn't always play these big budget games because the platform can't play those games. I mean, Nintendo's always been that hardware. They've never been the most powerful hardware. They've always been this platform that is for Nintendo first-party games because that's what everybody buys Nintendo platforms for. but you do have the occasional oddball third-party exclusive or something like that. But that's why people buy Nintendo hardware. And now you've just got this situation where they're openly allowing this. And Nintendo has dabbled in actually streaming games that can't natively run on their platform. They do this in Japan, actually. They've offered Resident Evil 7 as a streaming option on Nintendo Switch in Japan. Also, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I believe. Excuse me, I'm really starting to die here as I keep talking. So this really does solidify the two directions that these companies are going. And it's like, yeah, we all kind of saw this coming, but this is sort of to an extreme that, you thought like, wow, this could actually have some very meaningful impact on the games industry. And the thing is, Microsoft really does want Xbox Game Pass to have a place in the industry, because we already know from that data a few months back that PlayStation now has market leadership in terms of video game streaming services or subscription-based services. But even that total lump sum isn't that much money. Xbox Game Pass actually doesn't make that much money at all, which was surprising to some people, because Xbox Game Pass has a lot of good press and a lot of people saying a lot of good things about it, but that's because it's inherently not a streaming service, and it's a service where you download all your games, and that's what people like about it. And so, as we go into the future, and this possibly gets announced, the pricing details, once we get the major details of sort of how, like, what this would be, man, this could have some major implications. And it does make a lot of sense for smaller scale games like Ori and the Blind Forest to be natively ported over to the Switch. And so that's not even a situation where you'd need Game Pass. You could just buy that game on Switch. So Microsoft just, they bought all these studios, they've got all these services that they're working on. Yeah, they're going to have this family of Xbox Scarlet consoles. Who knows what those will look like. But I think if this doesn't say it now, it seems quite obvious that Microsoft is very much so going for low volume sales on hardware. It goes without saying that they would love to sell millions and millions of them. Where does this put PlayStation? Where does this put PlayStation now? Because Sony is very much in a situation where they are keeping their ecosystem very closed off. They want you to stay in PlayStation. And by PlayStation, they mean PlayStation hardware. Yes, PlayStation Now is available on PC. Yes, they've dabbled in porting some of their games over to PC. Actually, they just recently announced that they're porting Flower over to PC, which is a Sony first-party IP. It's developed by a third-party developer, but they own that IP. It does not have to leave PlayStation, but Sony does this. They've also did it with, I believe, Helldivers and one or two other smaller-scale PSN titles. But that's them testing the waters. I think they're being very conservative nowadays, especially given this aggressive approach that Microsoft is doing. And so it's going to get, God, if I didn't say it before, like, man, next gen's going to look so different. So interesting. It could really go in so many different avenues. And, it's also cool for Nintendo because every single generation they've always had the least powerful machine, and that's always sort of left them out in the dust in terms of having all these third-party games. Like, how do you release a Call of Duty? How do you release an Assassin's Creed, a Skyrim, things like that on Nintendo platforms? Sometimes those games launch on Nintendo, but they always have much lower visual fidelity. They always sell in a much lower volume. People always buy those games on an Xbox, PlayStation, or PC. That's just always the way it's been, and that's why I've always said that Nintendo has always submitted to the fact that they know that they're a second device to many people's households. And so now you finally, I think that's why Nintendo is accepting this or bringing this on or letting this happen, because they'll never make a machine that can capably run today's games. They are always going to make a machine that is for their games and for a select few of smaller games or select third-party developers that want to work on the platform, and that's fine, and that's not dissing Nintendo at all. We all know the Switch is doing incredibly well, and thank God it's doing well, because I love the Switch. Many people do, and I'm so glad that Nintendo's finally found their place with hardware, given that how bad the Wii U did. And even the Wii, for example. Yes, the Wii did phenomenally well commercially, but it had a severe problem with third-party support. And, not having a high attach rate, because people would buy, families, friends, older couples would buy Wiis and then never touch them ever again. It was sort of an empty success. Previous to that, the GameCube only did like 24 million units worldwide, or 21 million units. 21 or 24 million units. But the GameCube, it's a great platform, it just didn't really find its place. And so now we've got the Switch, which is doing really well and having a great library of games as well, like a vast library. You're not seeing that much shovelware on the system compared to previous hardware. So God, I don't know what else to say other than let's wait and see where this rumor takes us. But once this gets announced, because it seems like this is maybe going to happen, like, oof, I want to know how this is going to turn out. And I know many of you are listening to me drone on and on about this news story, just trying to find out who is the winner of Let's Talk Plus, our weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PSN code. Well, I'd like to congratulate Justin Abiog. Hope I said that right. Every single week I'm getting these names that I can't seem to pronounce. They're random drawings. I don't control this. I always get bad luck with these. But you are the winner. I'll be contacting you very soon. If you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it is very simple. Follow the link down below to the Gleam website. You can subscribe to the channel. You can follow on Twitter. You can follow on Twitch. All entries to win a $10 code, which will be announced next week here on Let's Talk PlayStation. Please, 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 please let me pay for your games. Those are all the news stories I want to talk about with you guys from this past week. Now, if you didn't see Tuesday's video, we opened up some PlayStation 3 games from eBay. I found a listing for 20 random PS3 games. Random games, mind you. I added 5 to my cart for 100 total random games. Most of you probably saw that. But if you didn't see it yet, go check it out. And for Tuesday's video, should I tell you? No, I'm not going to tell you. That one will be a mystery. So stay tuned to the channel for Tuesday's upcoming video, which you don't know about. Other than that, I'm going to take some medicine, throat spray, edit this, upload this, and go to bed because I severely need it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.